In accordance with the Commission on Restraint and Seclusion in Schools, which requires all school staff and new employees participate in a yearly training, we welcome you to the Behavior Supports, Conflict De-escalation, and Seclusion and Restraint training. The purpose of this training is to provide proactive strategies and techniques on how to support and maintain conditions in which all students and staff are safe in schools, provide effective alternatives to seclusion and restraint, provide a clear understanding of the definition, discuss the dangers of seclusion and restraint, discuss how to contact trained staff during a crisis, provide steps to avoid using seclusion and restraint, provide an understanding of debriefing practices to be implemented, and discuss current training practices for school employees. Behavioral interventions must ensure students are treated with dignity and respect, and that they are free from physical and mental abuse and should not compromise the health and safety of students. Seclusion or restraint should not be used as a routine safety measure and should never be utilized for the purposes of discipline or convenience. Seclusion or restraint should only be implemented in situations where a student's behavior or action poses an imminent danger of physical harm to self or others. Seclusion and restraint procedures must also be applied equally to all students when displaying behaviors that pose imminent danger to self or others. Staff can often find themselves in circumstances where students' emotions run high. In situations such as these, body language and other forms of nonverbal communication can cause an already tense environment to become escalated to the point where a student may be a danger to self or others. The key in such instances is to support the person, not just to address their behaviors. Our ultimate goal is not to discipline, restrain, or seclude students. It is to implement proactive strategies that reduce the likelihood of incidents that lead to escalation and the need for seclusion or restraint. The foundation of our behavior management system is to build positive, healthy relationships with students. In doing so, we create a safe environment where mistakes are just mistakes. It is easier for students to ask for help, and the conversations change from whose fault is it to what went wrong and what can we or you do better or differently? When these foundational strategies are in place, students and staff feel they are being treated with dignity and respect, and we can say, in this place, with these people, I feel safe. Positive behavior supports and behavioral interventions has a long history in public schools. The intent of these supports is to teach kids skills they need to be successful academically, behaviorally, and socially. It is based on a philosophy that requires good pedagogy, just like teaching academic skills. We present the skill or lesson, provide opportunities for practice, and correct errors. It reminds me of the old adage, if a kid is unable to ride a bike, we teach them how to ride the bike. If a child is unable to do math, we teach them to add and subtract. If a student makes a mistake on their spelling test, we reteach. If a student misbehaves, often our first reaction is to punish or discipline for the misbehavior. Just as with academics, we need to focus on teaching skills. As Dr. Ross Green states, kids do well if they can. As part of the MTSS process, we also have to respond to misbehavior. However, the focus is on encouraging and promoting pro-social skills. Implementing supports and interventions is key for students who have difficulty regulating their emotions. Strategies include teach and reinforce expectations, provide regular, consistent, positive feedback, foster a supportive environment, utilize structured routines, offer choice whenever possible, reinforce positive behaviors with praise and rewards, use proactive classroom management strategies, emphasize the use and development of social-emotional skills, and collaborate with support staff and families. Dealing with students in crisis is an emotional process, not only for students, but also for staff. When dealing with crisis events, staff must first examine themselves to ensure they are prepared and best suited to handle the situation. By affirming our feelings and choosing our behaviors, we ensure we do not get caught up in our own emotions of the event. It helps us ensure we are choosing the best responses, actions, or behaviors to best assist the student in their moment of need, or help us know how to get them to the person best suited to assist them. Recommended strategies for staff and caregivers include remain calm and use a non-threatening tone, be clear and specific, use short sentences with words they know, use active listening and empathy, offer choices and redirect behavior, maintain a safe distance, and avoid physical contact. Additionally, when assisting students in crisis, it is important to remember that the human body works against us in our moments of crisis. Our body is designed to respond the opposite of how we ask students to respond. When under stress, adrenaline levels, endorphins, breathing, and pulse all go up, adding to the fight or flight response we feel. Along with this, the skills we ask students to utilize, such as communication, reasoning, compromising, and listening skills, all shut down until they can de-escalate. Often, when asking them to engage in these skills while still escalated, we are only adding fuel to the fire. Instead, we can assist with the de-escalation process by using a relaxed, non-confrontational posture, staying out of the student's personal space, avoid overreacting, do not engage in a power struggle, and if possible, isolate the student by removing peers and onlookers, as they tend to make the situation worse. When assisting students in de-escalation, encourage students to implement self-regulation strategies. Self-regulation is a person's ability to control their emotions and behaviors in order to cope effectively with the environment. In order to self-regulate, one must be able to recognize their emotional state, which then helps them de-escalate or choose a more effective behavior. Students with IEPs that have behavior intervention plans often have specific self-regulation strategies that are to be implemented within the plan and need to be followed as outlined in the plan. Some initial self-regulation skills include affirming the student's feelings and helping them choose a more positive behavior, implementing a breathing strategy, implementing a body scan, or engaging in sensory grounding activities. Self-regulation strategies can be just as important for staff as they are for students in managing daily stress and conflict. Co-regulation is the interactive process where a regulated, calm individual helps another person navigate intense emotion or stress. Co-regulation skills include relaxed, safe present, stimulus management, affirming feelings, offering options, cueing safer behavior, active and reflective listening. It is important to remember that what you say and how you say it can escalate a crisis or help minimize it. Important verbal techniques include keeping your demeanor non-confrontational, initiate communication and build rapport, show willingness to listen. The phrases, "What do you need?" or "What can I do to help?" are good starters. Use clear, straightforward language and be brief in your verbalizations. In order to better understand a student's perspective, encourage them to express their needs, wants, or emotions. Demonstrate genuine attention to what the person is saying. You may not always agree with their feelings or reactions, but we can acknowledge that this is how they feel. Attempt to find common ground or respectfully acknowledge differing viewpoints to reduce tension. Define acceptable boundaries by using fail-safe choices. You said you're feeling pretty upset. How about you use the calming room or sensory room? People are more likely to believe what they see than what they hear, as actions often speak louder than words. As we said earlier, when we are escalated, we don't always process what is being said verbally. Important nonverbal techniques to utilize in a crisis situation include: keep your hands visible and relax. Avoid crossing your arms to prevent looking defensive. Be mindful of eye contact. Maintain a neutral, calm facial expression. Move slowly and smoothly and avoid sudden gestures that may startle. Use small nods or gestures to show you're listening. Minimize your size in relation to the student. Intentionally pause and give time to process and answer. If appropriate, clear exit paths to ensure the student feels they can leave safely.
We must ensure that we implement strategies before immediately moving a student into a seclusion or restraint, as the use of seclusion and restraint must be a last resort. When a student displays inappropriate behaviors, staff can help students by utilizing planned ignoring, adjusting or changing the activity to get him or her re-involved with learning. Selecting a task that will provide immediate success often helps guide students back on track. Separating the student from others by sending the student out of the room on an errand or to get a drink to cool off. Offering or allowing the use of a permanent pass, or offering a time-in situation with a support person outside the classroom. When possible, talk to the disruptive student out of the classroom, away from other students, so that he or she can save face. Move the student to a different part of the classroom, either closer to the teacher or further away from the audience, or use a timeout within the classroom. In order to ensure that we all operate with the same definition of seclusion, provided is the state of Indiana's definition of seclusion: the confinement of a student alone in a room or area from which the student is physically prevented from leaving. The term does not include a supervised time out or scheduled break during which an adult is continually present in the room with the student. Two key questions in determining whether a seclusion has occurred: Were they alone in the room by themselves? Did a staff member physically prevent them from leaving the space? If both criteria are met, then the incident needs to be reported as a seclusion and documented. It is also important that we have a common definition of restraint. The state of Indiana's definition of restraint is physical contact between a school employee and a student in which the student unwillingly participates and that involves the use of a manual hold to restrict freedom of movement of all or part of the student's body or to restrict normal access to the student's body. The term does not include briefly holding a student without undue force in order to calm or comfort the student or to prevent unsafe behavior, such as running into traffic or engaging in a physical altercation, a physical escort, or physical contact intended to gently assist or prompt a student in performing a task, or to guide or assist a student from one area to another. The term does not include the use of a bus harness or other safety equipment that is used to restrain a student during transport when the harness or safety equipment is necessary for safety purposes. Again, when such instances occur, the restraint needs to be reported as a restraint and documented. Seclusion and restraint shall not be used except when used as a last resort and only when the student's behavior poses imminent risk of injury to self and others, and other less restrictive interventions are ineffective. The use of restraint by a school resource officer will follow the officer's agency's training regarding the use of force. Property destruction does not justify the use of seclusion and restraint. In the case where a student drops or is on the floor, staff shall not lift them to a standing or seated position from the floor. The entire philosophy of restraint and seclusion is based on the principle that all people have the right to be treated with unconditional dignity and respect. There are dangers associated with the use of seclusion and restraint for both students and staff, which include physical injury or death, emotional trauma, psychological harm. There is also potential for misuse or overuse. Due to the additional risks related to restraining students on the ground, HSC staff that are trained in restraint are not trained to restrain students on the ground in a prone or face down, supine, face up, or side-lying position. Once a student goes to the ground, staff should release the student for safety. Due to these concerns, seclusion and restraint is controversial, and there are legal and ethical concerns, so documentation and ensuring compliance with safety protocols is extremely important. Every building has staff trained in seclusion and restraint and has a building lead. In the event there is a crisis that may lead to seclusion or restraint, it is important to utilize trained staff to respond. Please ensure you are aware of your building's communication protocols for an emergency and ensure you know how to properly use radios, call buttons, and phone systems to call for assistance. We must ensure timely response and support for students and staff. If you are currently unaware of communication protocols or who the staff trained in your building are, please contact your building administrator. Much of the work to reduce seclusion and restraint takes place far before an incident ever occurs. Steps that staff can take to avoid the use of seclusion and restraint include striving to create a positive and inclusive school and classroom climate by promoting respect, dignity, and belonging, celebrating differences and being responsive to such differences, and engaging students in leadership roles and peer mentoring. Staff can utilize proactive de-escalation strategies, such as identifying early warning signs of distress, providing calming spaces and sensory tools, encouraging voice and choice, and utilizing proper verbal and nonverbal techniques to assist with de-escalation. Staff can strive to understand the effects of trauma and how to build trusting relationships through empathy and consistency. Teams can proactively conduct functional behavior assessments, update them accordingly, and conduct evaluations and reevaluations when needed. Teams can ensure the creation and implementation of behavior intervention plans and meet to adjust them as behavior changes dictate. Schools as a whole should work to implement MTSS in order to reduce the need for seclusion and restraint. In doing so, schools and staff foster a positive, supportive classroom environment where the need for seclusion and restraint is less likely. When a seclusion or restraint occurs, buildings are to utilize a 3-part debriefing model for crisis situations. The 3 parts may occur in 1, 2, or 3 sessions and in one day or on multiple days. Part 1, the immediate debrief, is a check-in with the student and staff involved in the incident. It is an immediate check for emotional and physical needs and concerns. Any immediate needs or supports are addressed and provided for at this time. Part 2, the assessment debrief, takes place when the individuals involved are stabilized and at baseline. It is an assessment of positive actions and areas of growth that need to occur. Part 3, the long-term debrief, is where action items are created and put into place. It is important to note that this process can be utilized for any crisis event, not just seclusion or restraint. Each year, designated school staff attend either an initial or recertification training on prevention, de-escalation, and crisis intervention. We currently utilize the MANT system in HSC. Additional designated staff attend MANT Shield and Pad training in order to help further reduce the need for restraint and seclusion and assist with students that self-harm. Each school has designated a MANT team lead. The team lead, in conjunction with MANT trainers, will hold quarterly MANT practice sessions within the school to ensure staff regularly practice and discuss related topics. Some final thoughts as we conclude this presentation. Every effort must be made to avoid the use of seclusion and restraint. Physical restraint should not be used except when used as a last resort and only when the student's behavior poses imminent risk of injury to self and others, and other less restrictive interventions are ineffective. Use of restraint by a school resource officer will follow the officer's agency's training regarding the use of force. Please be aware that use of force for officers is different than our training. While SROs are aware and knowledgeable of MANT, they are not trained nor do they utilize MANT. Staff will utilize MANT strategies until interventions have proven ineffective and the situation is no longer safe, at which point administration may request police intervention, or officers determine the situation is unsafe or a crime has been committed and take over the situation. Other than in a case of an extreme emergency, a student shall never be physically restrained by a school employee who has not received appropriate training. It is important to note that staff do not need to be MANT trained in order to break up a fight. There is Indiana code and recent court action supporting teachers' actions in breaking up fights, and as the educational law professor Bernie James states, we exist to intervene. Every incident in which seclusion and restraint is used on a student must be documented. Please contact administration when an incident occurs to ensure proper reporting within the HSC Reporting Center. In closing, building positive, healthy relationships with our students where they feel safe and supported within our building is our greatest tool in reducing incidents of major escalation where seclusion and restraint may be needed. We hope today's presentation has provided tools and strategies or reminders of tools and strategies that you can carry with you this school year. Have a great school year.